Another Friday night, another special dinner to celebrate Carter's homecoming. I sighed as I put the final touches on the table setting. Dean had asked me to prepare Carter's favorite meal to welcome him back from his first year of college. Despite my reservations, I wanted to make a good impression and start on the right foot. The front door opened and Carter strolled in nonchalantly. "Hey," he muttered with a slight nod before brushing past me into the living room. "Carter, you're home!" Dean greeted him warmly, pulling him into a hug. "How was the drive?" "Long," Carter shrugged, glancing around dismissively. "Smells like someone's been cooking up a storm." I forced a smile. "I made your favorite, pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes. Thought we could have a nice family dinner to celebrate you being back." Carter scoffed. "Seriously? I've been looking forward to freedom from this sort of thing all year." He flopped onto the couch and grabbed the TV remote. Dean frowned slightly. "Carter, your stepmom went to a lot of effort here. The least you could do is join us for dinner." "Like I said, I'm free now. No more obligatory family crap." Carter didn't even look up from flipping channels. Disappointment and humiliation washed over me, but I refused to cause a scene on Carter's first night back. "It's no problem, really. I'll just leave you two to catch up." I hurried to the kitchen, fighting back tears. So much for trying to build bridges with my stepson. After a year apart, I'd hoped Carter might meet me halfway, but his cold reception made it clear nothing had changed. As I scraped the ruined dinner into the trash, I wondered just how long I could keep playing happy family. Over the following weeks, cracks began to show in our familial facade. Whenever Dean was at work, Carter made sure to subtly undermine me at every turn. He'd leave messes around the house, claiming he'd forgotten whose job it was to clean up after him. Snide remarks about my cooking skills became routine, even though he'd once raved about my meals. One afternoon, Dean got home early to find me frantically searching the den. "What's going on?" he asked with concern. Before I could explain, Carter sauntered in with a smirk. "Sorry, forgot to mention. I saw Jenna rummaging through your office earlier. Seemed pretty suspicious." Dean turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Jenna? Were you going through my things?" "No, of course not," I protested, shooting Carter a glare. "I was just looking for my necklace. It's gone missing." Carter shrugged innocently. "Maybe you should be more careful with your stuff." An uneasy silence fell over the room. Dean rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Well, I'm sure it'll turn up. Just try to be a bit more organized, okay, honey?" My mouth hung open in disbelief as Carter slipped away, a triumphant grin plastered across his face. He knew exactly what he was doing, planting seeds of doubt to drive a wedge between Dean and me. The incidents continued, each one chipping away at my credibility bit by bit. A missing set of car keys somehow ended up in my purse. A kitchen knife disappeared only to reappear tucked under the couch cushions. No matter how much I denied any involvement, Carter's well-timed observations made me seem careless at best, deceitful at worst. Dean tried to stay impartial, but I could see the strain it put on him. As much as he wanted to trust his wife, his son's steady stream of accusations made him second-guess everything. The man I'd fallen in love with, kind, caring, always willing to hear me out, started to pull away imperceptibly. Some nights I'd lie awake, Carter's chuckle echoing in my mind as I replayed the latest incident. Tears stung my eyes at the realization that my stepson was slowly poisoning my relationship with Dean, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At least not yet. Carter's vendetta against me only escalated as the summer trudged on. He became more brazen, ramping up the disrespect whenever Dean had to work late. I did my best to bite my tongue, not wanting to come across as the nagging stepmother constantly complaining about her stepson. One afternoon, Dean was out running errands when Carter barged into the living room trailing a thick plume of pungent smoke. "Carter, are you smoking in the house?" I coughed, waving the haze away. He blew a cloud of smoke in my direction defiantly. "So what if I am?" "You know the rules. No smoking inside, especially not your father's cigars." I gestured to the expensive Cuban cigar smoldering between his fingers. Carter sneered. "Dad's too busy working his ass off to enjoy them anyway. Might as well get some use out of the things." Anger burned in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Put it out right now, or I'll tell your father myself." In response, Carter defiantly took another long drag, then strutted down the hallway, leaving an acrid trail in his wake. I spent the next hour trying to air out the house before Dean got home. A few days later, the campus dean called to notify us that Carter had been suspended for the upcoming semester due to conduct violations. Dean was beside himself, demanding an explanation from his son. Carter simply shrugged it off. "Bunch of bees charges, doesn't matter, I'll just take some time off and re-enroll later." While Dean ranted about wasted potential, I pulled Carter aside. "How could you jeopardize your education like that? Don't you care at all about your future?" He laughed coldly. "Save the self-righteous mom routine for someone who actually cares what you think." In that moment, I lost my temper, raising my voice for the first time. "You arrogant, ungrateful little—" "Everything okay over here?" Dean interrupted, clearly concerned by our heated exchange. I swallowed hard, my face flushed. It's fine," I lied through gritted teeth. Carter just smirked triumphantly. I realized then I had two choices: confront Carter and risk driving a wedge between Dean and his only child, or stay silent in hopes the brat would eventually grow up. I opted for the latter, at least for the time being. Carter's destructive behavior reached a climax a few weeks later when he decided to throw an unauthorized party at our house. Dean was out of town on business, leaving me to deal with the entitled brat. Around 10 p.m., cars began lining the street outside. Thumping bass shook the windows as groups of rowdy college kids streamed in carrying cases of beer. I stormed into the living room to find Carter in the midst of the chaos. "What is going on here?" I shouted over the music. "You can't just throw a party without asking." Carter laughed derisively. "Last I checked, I still live here. I'll do whatever I want." "Not under my roof." I reached for the stereo to shut off the ear-splitting music, but a drunk partygoer shoved me away. "Hey, back off, lady," he slurred. Hands trembling with rage, I dialed Dean's number. Voicemail. I left an urgent message pleading for him to come home and put an end to this madness. The party raged into the early morning hours. Beer cans and red Solo cups littered the floor. Someone had vomited on the new rug in the den. When I threatened to call the cops, Carter just laughed coldly. "Go ahead. I'd love to see you try to explain this one to Dad." By the time the last reveler finally stumbled out, dawn was breaking. I collapsed on the couch, utterly drained and dreading the inevitable fallout when Dean returned. Sure enough, he was blindsided the second he walked through the door. "What the hell happened here?" he roared upon seeing the trash state of our home. Carter was waiting with a wry grin. "Sorry, Dad. Tried to keep things under control, but Jenna's party got way out of hand. She must have invited half the neighborhood over." My jaw dropped at the outrageous lie. "That's not true at all. He threw this stupid—" Dean held up a hand, his eyes blazing with anger. "I don't want to hear any more excuses, Jenna. Just go clean up this mess while I figure out how to pay for the damages." As I fought back furious tears, picking up shards of broken glass and overturned furniture, I knew Carter had finally crossed a line. This was war, and I was done playing nice. In the days following the disastrous party, I reached my breaking point. Carter's snide comments and underhanded tactics had gone too far. It was time to fight fire with fire. While Dean was at work, I discreetly set up hidden cameras throughout the house, in the living room, kitchen, even Carter's bedroom. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure to catch every crooked move on film. Carter must have sensed the shifting dynamic, because he started actively trying to get under my skin at every opportunity. Dirty dishes were left out with mocking notes like, "Thanks for cleaning up after me, stepmommy." He'd barge into rooms and fart obnoxiously before winking at me. Childish pranks, but clearly designed to provoke a reaction. The final straw came when I discovered my favorite potted plant had been unceremoniously dumped over, soil littering the carpet. As I knelt to scoop up the mess, Carter strutted by. "You really should be more careful," he tsked. "Wouldn't want Dad thinking you've let the place go." White-hot fury blazed within me, but I refused to take the bait this time. "You're right, Carter. I'll be sure to show your father just how careless I've been." His cocky grin faltered slightly at my uncharacteristic calm. For once, I wasn't playing the flustered victim. Over the next few weeks, I diligently cataloged Carter's escalating misbehavior via the hidden cameras. There were the obvious things: him smugly admitting to the plant incident, emptying my bathroom cabinets onto the floor, even rifling through my underwear drawer and pocketing a lacy pair of panties with a depraved cackle. But there were also more subtle slights captured. Him purposefully breaking a vase and staging the shards to frame me, or scuffing up the walls near my bedroom before telling Dean he saw me carelessly knocking into them with boxes. My rage simmered, but I remained outwardly unperturbed, quietly letting Carter dig himself deeper and deeper into a hole of his own making. Dean noticed the change and occasionally commented on how I seemed calmer about the whole situation. Little did he know, the cameras were rolling, documenting every piece of incriminating proof. At last, it was time to bring Carter's reprehensible behavior into the light. With the damning video evidence compiled, I began eagerly awaiting the right moment to utterly shatter his fake image of the innocent, put-upon son. A deliciously devious smile crossed my lips as I imagined the look of shock and horror on Carter's sneering face when I revealed just how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered him. Revenge would be sweet. I decided to strike at our next family dinner, when Dean's parents, Bonnie and Roy, would also be present. As we gathered around the table, Carter was already working his magic, charming his grandparents with that fake smile he reserved for relatives. "College agrees with you, Carter," Bonnie remarked proudly, "so mature and responsible." Carter flashed me a sly look as he replied, "I sure have had to grow up fast, Graham, especially dealing with certain household situations." Dean's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before Carter could respond, I cleared my throat loudly. "Actually, I'm glad you all are here. There's something I need to address." I turned to my dumbfounded husband. "Dean, I've spent months trying my best to keep the peace, to not rock the boat with Carter's behavior." I shot Carter a pointed glare and he paled slightly. "But enough is enough. The disrespect, the deliberate cruelty and mind games, it stops tonight." My heart raced as I prepared to unveil my carefully assembled proof. Carter squirmed in his seat. "Listen, whatever she's about to say—" "Shut up," I snapped, a firm edge in my voice that hung in the air. Carter's eyes went wide, rendered speechless for once. Pulling out my phone, I queued up the first video clip and turned it towards Dean and his parents. It showed Carter gleefully vandalizing my plant, grinning wickedly at the camera. A collective gasp went around the table. That's not what it looks like," Carter sputtered weakly. But I was just getting started. One by one, I played the videos. Carter purposefully trying to get me in trouble with staged incidents, his crude violation of my privacy, even outright admitting to the party that had caused so much strife. With each new piece of evidence, my stepson's eyes darted around desperately until he was finally rendered mute, unable to talk his way out of this. Dean's face was pale, his expression one of utter disbelief and horror as he watched his only child's true nature be laid bare. Even Bonnie and Roy were dumbstruck by the events unfolding before them. When the finale video played, a montage of Carter's most vile verbal insults and threats directed at me, a deafening silence hung over the table. I looked each of them squarely in the eyes before finally meeting Carter's pathetic, trembling gaze. "So," I stated flatly. "Any other questions about my behavior?" The silence that followed was excruciating. Carter shifted uncomfortably, his mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. Dean stared at his son, utterly shell-shocked, while Bonnie and Roy bore matching expressions of horrified disbelief. Finally, Dean found his voice, the words coming out in a trembling rasp. "Carter, what? How could you?" Carter licked his lips nervously and tried to force a chuckle. "Come on, Dad. You know how good I am with computers. That footage is obviously faked. Don't you dare try to lie anymore," I exploded, slamming my fist on the table. "We've all seen the truth with our own eyes." "Is it true, Carter?" Bonnie's voice was tight with unshed tears. "Did you really do those horrible things to Jenna?" For a long moment, Carter avoided her piercing gaze. Then, almost inaudibly, he muttered, "So what if I did?" The smug defiance in his tone lit a fire in Dean's eyes. He shot up from his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. "That's enough. I will not have you disrespecting my wife any longer with your twisted games." Carter recoiled from the booming force of his father's voice. In all the years I'd known them, I'd never seen Dean raise his voice like that towards his son. The alpha male persona was chilling. "But, Dad, you have to listen." "No, you listen." Dean stabbed a finger towards Carter's face, his jaw clenching with barely restrained rage. I don't know what I did to make you resent Jenna so much, to treat her so atrociously. But I can promise you, those days of disrespect under my roof are over. Carter opened his mouth to protest, but Dean barreled forward. In fact, I think it's time you experience the real world without Mommy and Daddy's support. Starting tonight, you're going to find your own place to live and get a job to pay your bills. Maybe taking some personal responsibility will straighten you out. The spoiled brat's face twisted into an ugly snarl. You're choosing her over your own flesh and blood? Some great father you are! Almost instantly, Bonnie fixed Carter with a withering look. Don't you dare speak to your father that way after what we just saw. He's right. It's long past time you faced some consequences for your actions. The certainty in her tone, mirrored by Roy's solemn nod, seemed to drain the last of Carter's bravado. He cast one final venomous glare at me before storming out of the dining room, footsteps pounding up the stairs. As the tension finally broke, I sagged back in my chair, suddenly feeling every ounce of the burden I'd been carrying for months. Dean pulled me into a tight embrace, his own eyes brimming with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Jenna, he whispered into my hair. Sorry I didn't see the truth sooner, but I promise you, no more games, no more toxicity. It's time Carter faced reality. After all the anguish and anger, an immense sense of relief washed over me. Finally, no more torment, no more lies corrupting my marriage. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. In the aftermath of that explosive dinner, Carter wasted no time moving out of the house. Dean stood firm, refusing to enable his son's entitled behavior any longer. A tense silence lingered between them as Carter packed up his belongings. You'll regret this, Carter spat viciously at me before storming out the door with his bags. Just you wait. But his threats rang hollow now. Dean and I had already weathered the worst of Carter's tantrums. With the dark truth exposed, his hold over us was broken. The first few months apart were admittedly rough. Carter stubbornly tried to make it on his own, too proud to admit failure and ask for help. Dean received terse messages about dead-end jobs and dingy apartments. I could tell it pained him to watch his son struggle. Roy and Bonnie remained ambivalent, their loyalty torn between siding with their grandson and acknowledging the wake-up call he so clearly needed. Our weekly family dinners were strained affairs, with Carter conspicuously absent. Slowly but surely, however, Carter's defiant exterior began to crack as the challenges of self-reliance took their toll. He finally swallowed what was left of his pride and re-enrolled in community college, realizing the value of completing his degree. One night, Dean and I were curled up watching a movie when his phone buzzed. He frowned at the caller ID, but answered tentatively. Hello, Carter? I watched Dean's expression morph from concern to stunned disbelief as Carter's voice crackled through the line. After a long pause, the faintest hint of a smile played across his lips. When he finally ended the call, Dean turned to me with an almost giddy look. Carter, he apologized. He says living alone has been humbling, made him realize how good he really had it. My own jaw dropped as Dean continued. He asked if he could come by soon to apologize in person and get a fresh start. Though part of me still harbored resentment over Carter's cruelty, I could only nod numbly and pull Dean into a fierce hug. In that moment, I allowed myself to feel a sliver of hope that our family could finally heal. True to his word, Carter sheepishly appeared on our doorstep a week later, his cockiness replaced by a haggard vulnerability. As he struggled to meet my gaze, I could see the arrogant, selfish boy had been replaced by someone rawer, more aware of life's difficulties. Jenna, I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, he began haltingly. But I want you to know, from the bottom of my heart, how sorry I am for everything I put you through. The way I acted, it was inexcusable. Carter's eyes shone with the first hints of genuine remorse I'd ever witnessed. If you're willing, I'd like us to start over, to have a real relationship built on mutual understanding and respect. Because at the end of the day, he paused, choking up. You're the only mother I've got. In that moment, something deep inside me unlocked. The resentment, the fury, the urge to make him pay, it all melted away to be replaced by the faintest ember of empathy. Raising a hand to Carter's cheek, I simply nodded. Moving forward would be a long, arduous journey, but at last, I felt like we had a chance to forge the family I'd always dreamed of. One of love, trust, and shed of Carter's poisonous influence once and for all. The piercing scream ripped through my chest before I could stop it. There they were, tangled together like poisonous vines, my husband and my stepmother, locked in a sordid embrace on the kitchen counter. My eyes stung with unshed tears as Alex scrambled off Lana, his limp excuse for a shirt hanging open. "Bryn, this isn't—" He couldn't even finish his thought. Lana simply smirked, not an ounce of shame etched on her face as she smoothed her rumpled silk robe. "Hello, dear. Didn't expect you home so soon, did you?" Her saccharine tone sliced through me like shards of glass. You vile snake!" I hurled the words at her, chest heaving. "How could you, both of you?" Alex opened his mouth again, but I cut him off with a hand slicing through the air. "Save it. I don't want to hear another word from you." Pivoting on my heel, I stormed out of that wretched kitchen, slamming the front door behind me with enough force to rattle the windows. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks as I climbed into my car and peeled out of the driveway, desperate to put distance between me and that nightmare. I must have driven aimlessly for hours, the weight of their betrayal crushing my very soul. Lana, the woman who had stepped into my life as a stepmother when I was just 16, carrying on an affair with my own husband behind my back. And Alex, the one person I'd thought I could trust without question. How could I have been so blind? When I finally returned home well past midnight, the house was blissfully empty. I made a beeline for the den, scooping up the mail and papers scattered across the desk. That's when a plain white envelope caught my eye, addressed to me in my father's familiar scrawl. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Several pages fell out, covered in Dad's tight penmanship. My eyes immediately landed on the top line. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it." Dad's words jumped off the page, each line a punch to the gut. "I'm sorry I couldn't share this with you in person, but I've long had my suspicions about Lana. That woman is rotten to the core, manipulative and hell-bent on sinking her claws into our family's wealth by any means necessary." I sucked in a sharp breath, the pieces slowly falling into place. Dad had tried to warn me, but I'd been too blind to see Lana's true nature. Too consumed by the relief of having a mother figure after Mom's passing to look past the sugary facade. A noise from the hallway made me stiffen. Through the open doorway, I saw Lana saunter by in her silk robe, not a care in the world, like she hadn't just decimated my life mere hours ago. "You lying snake!" The biting words burst from my lips before I could stop them. Lana whirled around, eyes widening in mock innocence. "Why, Bryn, whatever is the matter?" "Don't play dumb with me." I shook the letter at her. "Dad knew all about your twisted games. He tried to stop you from worming your way into this family's life." A flicker of anger flashed across her face before the syrupy mask slid back into place. "Your father was a paranoid old fool obsessed with fending off delusions. I pitied him, really." White-hot rage lanced through me, and I moved towards her, fists clenched, ready to unleash years of pent-up fury. But she only laughed, taking a step back with a shake of her head. "I'd think twice about that if I were you, dear. Your father's ramblings won't hold up in court against the truth." With that parting shot, she turned and slinked away, leaving me seething in her wake. Gripping the letter, I stalked into the living room and grabbed my cell phone, scrolling to find the number Dad had left. Mara Lewis, his attorney. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. "Mara Lewis. Miss Lewis, it's Bryn Ellis. I need to meet with you as soon as possible regarding my father's estate." There was a pause. "Of course. I've been expecting your call. Shall we say 3 p.m. this afternoon at my office?" "I'll be there," I replied through gritted teeth. If Lana thought she could slither her way out of this, she was sorely mistaken. Dad had left me the key to exposing her twisted lies, and I wasn't about to let his final wishes go unanswered. She was going to pay for destroying my family, no matter what it took. By the time I ended the call, my path forward was clear. If Lana wanted truth and consequences, I would make damn sure that's exactly what she got. I stalked into Mara's office precisely at 3 p.m., my heels striking the marble floor with purpose. The impeccably dressed attorney rose from behind her desk, expression impassive. "Miss Ellis, thank you for coming in on such short notice." She waved a hand towards the plush leather chairs facing her desk. "Please, have a seat." I sank into one of the chairs, back ramrod straight as I met her cool gaze. "I want to know everything. What evidence my father had against Lana, and what legal avenues are available to me." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well." She reached into her desk drawer and retrieved a thick manila envelope. "These are the files your father left pertaining to his concerns over your stepmother." My fingers trembled slightly as I accepted the weighty bundle. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages. Reams of financial statements, phone records, even photos capturing Lana in compromising situations. As you can see, your father was quite thorough in documenting his findings. Mara allowed the faintest hint of admiration to color her tone. "However, much of this intelligence alone will be difficult to prosecute without corroborating evidence from other parties." I looked up sharply. "Are you saying Lana could still worm her way out of this?" "Potentially." Mara laced her fingers together atop the desk. "Which is why we must pursue a multi-pronged strategy. Legal proceedings, but also more personal venues of exposing the truth." A tiny smirk played across my lips as understanding dawned. "You mean going public and destroying her reputation beyond repair?" The barest hint of a nod. "Precisely. Draw her deceit into the light so utterly that no courtroom theatrics can obscure it." My gaze hardened to steel. "Do it. I want the whole book thrown at that conniving witch, financially, socially, all of it. I'll get you whatever information you need to leave her life in ashes." Mara's expression didn't flicker, but I could have sworn I saw a glint of approval in those steely eyes. "Very good, Miss Ellis. Then let's begin making preparations, shall we?" As I exited the office, I was acutely aware of the warpath stretching before me. Lana had waged her deception in the shadows, but by the time I was done, her wicked truth would be on display for the whole world to revile. The game was on. When I arrived home, Lana was lounging on the patio in that damned silk robe, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. She cast me a poisonous smile over the rim. "Why the grim look of determination, dear? Nothing unpleasant from the attorney I trust?" Digging my nails into my palms, I forced myself not to rise to the bait. "You'll see soon enough." With that, I brushed past her, heading inside to set my plans into motion. If the Viper thought she'd already won, she was sorely mistaken. I was just getting started. My first call was to Sam Jenkins, the one person I trusted wholeheartedly, my best friend since junior high. When she answered, I wasted no time launching into the sordid tale. "Oh my God, Bryn!" Even over the phone, her shock was palpable. "I can't believe Alex did that to you. And with your stepmother? Those depraved scum!" I laughed darkly. "Oh, just wait until you hear the rest. This goes so much deeper." By the time I finished recounting Dad's letter and Lana's damning past, Sam was fuming. "That evil, manipulative witch. We have to take her down, Bryn. She can't be allowed to get away with what she's done to your family." Exactly. I exhaled slowly, appreciating the sense of ally I now had at my side. "That's why I need your help. We're going to expose Lana for the venomous snake she is, then make sure she can never slither back into a position to hurt anyone else." There was steely determination in Sam's tone. "Just say the word, B. I'm in all the way, whatever it takes." As I disconnected the call, lightning crackled outside, a tempest brewing to match the storm I was about to unleash. The sun was setting on Lana Winter's web of lies. The next few weeks were a dizzying blur of covert meetings, strategizing with Sam and Mara to meticulously construct our multi-pronged attack. Lana didn't suspect a thing as she swanned around the house, periodically shooting me smug looks that made my blood boil. If only she knew what was coming. The first phase began with an anonymous online expose that Sam had expertly crafted, laying out the lurid details of Lana's tawdry affair with my husband in cold, hard facts. The story spread like wildfire, scandalous screenshots circulating rapidly across social media. I'll never forget the look of shock on Lana's face when she finally saw the viral firestorm erupting around her. "What is this?" She gestured wildly at her laptop, face flushed with rage. "Some kind of sick prank?" I strolled over, feigning nonchalance as I scanned the screen. "Oh my, someone certainly did dig up some unsavory details about your personal life." I clicked my tongue in mock sympathy. "Not a good look, Lana. So much for keeping up that sugary facade, hmm?" She rounded on me, eyes blazing like hellfire. "You did this?" I shrugged one shoulder lazily. "Can't control the internet, can you?" Allowing a small, satisfied smile to curve my lips, I turned and headed for the door. "But hey, look on the bright side. At least now everyone knows the real you." Her screams and curses followed me down the hallway, bringing a wicked gratification. That was just the opening salvo. The next phase unfolded in a rapid succession of haymakers. Carefully tailored leaks to the right sources, exposing Lana's shady business dealings and financial improprieties. Records of offshore bank accounts, incriminating call recordings, whistleblowers emerging from the shadows of her past, painting a damning portrait of greed and exploitation. Wave after wave of evidence battered her so-called good name, and with each fresh public humiliation, I could see the strain spreading across Alex's features. Poor sap, he'd believed Lana's con job too, letting himself get tangled up in her lies. Well, live by deception, die by deception, as they say. As the hammer continued to drop, the elite country club where Lana had hobnobbed with high society revoked her membership, effective immediately. Friendships fractured within days, former allies distancing themselves from the maelstrom of scandal now swirling around her. I savored every ignominious moment from a carefully calculated distance, emerging again only when the final crushing blow was prepared to strike. It was the night of the charity gala held annually by Lana's once-respected charitable foundation, an evening where she'd always taken great pains to present her saintly public visage. Well, that mask would shatter into a million pieces tonight. Sam and I positioned ourselves across the street from the grand ballroom entrance, dressed to the nines and clutching crystal flutes of champagne. At precisely 8 p.m., a towering billboard blazed to life on the adjacent building, emblazoned with a single phrase in garish red font: "Lane Winters, a legacy of lies, the full uncovered story." Beneath it, a QR code linked to a viral data dump, all of Dad's compiled evidence, the financial records and whistleblower testimonies presented in one thorough, utterly damning package for the world to consume. Within minutes, camera flashes were popping in a frenzied strobe across the red carpet as guests arrived. Those who saw the blistering billboard gaped in shock, muttering in phones held aloft, spreading the QR code like a contagion. Finally, Lana appeared in the center of the spectacle, eyes bulging in outrage and disbelief, as the realization of her annihilated reputation sank in. For one shining moment, her masquerade crumbled completely, exposing the true, blackened soul beneath. Another slow smile crept across my lips as I sipped my champagne and watched the Empress suffer a very public, very deserved execution. The first phase of my vengeance was complete. Time to turn my attention to the legal battlefield that awaited, and leave Lana to drown in the ocean of her own deceptions. The days following the charity gala exposé were a blissful reprieve as Lana went into full damage control mode. The house was mercifully quiet. She and Alex holed up separately with their lawyers, no doubt scrambling for some Hail Mary to counter the mountain of evidence we detonated. Good luck with that. Predictably, the first incoming volley was Lana summoning me to the den with a curt, "We need to talk." I strolled in to find her perched like a coiled viper on the chaise, eyes glinting with a mixture of wounded fury and smug calculation. Clearly, she fancied herself holding some trump card. "Well, I see you've had your fun with your little internet theatrics." Her lips twisted in a mocking sneer. "But now the real game begins, pet. Unless you want to spend the rest of your days drowning in litigation, you'll back down immediately." I raised an eyebrow coolly. "Is that so? And what leverage could you possibly have, Lana?" Quick as a cobra's strike, she seized a folder from the side table and flung it at me. "See for yourself, dear." I crouched to scoop up the scattered contents, bank statements, property records, all laying out mine and Alex's joint assets in exacting detail. "What is this?" "Your Achilles' heel." A lupine smile curved her lips as the trap sprung shut. "Everything you've attempted so far is circumstantial at best. But with one simple lawsuit, your darling husband and I can ensure you're left with nothing but the clothes on your back." A cold shudder of realization trickled down my spine as her ploy crystallized. Of course. Attack my financial foundation in tandem with the smear campaign. Bleed me dry through the legal system while simultaneously stripping me of credibility. Cunning little viper, I had to hand it to her. But if she thought unveiled threats would make me balk, she had sorely underestimated me. Straightening, I met her wolfish stare with an Arctic one of my own. You can posture and grandstand all you want, Lana. It won't make a damn bit of difference. I allowed a grim smile to tug the corner of my mouth. I have the receipts, as they say. The money trails, the testimony, all of it. You're going down in flames one way or another. Her serpentine eyes narrowed dangerously. We'll see about that, won't we? With that parting shot still ringing in the air between us, I turned and marched from the room, the first tremors of the legal earthquake we were about to endure shuddering beneath my feet. Mara was waiting in her office a short while later when I swept through the door and took a seat across from her desk. Let's go on the offensive, were the first words out of my mouth. A flicker of understanding passed behind her eyes as she rifled through a stack of documents. Of course, we anticipated this maneuver when formulating strategy. She pushed a dossier across the desk towards me. Here are the grounds we'll pursue. Alienation of affection to form the basis of your divorce proceedings against Mr. Hammond. Given the clear evidence of infidelity and marital misconduct on his part, we have more than sufficient legal footing. My finger traced the printed words, relief loosening the knot that had formed in my chest. Divorce the cheating bastard, of course. Step 1. And for the vindictive viper? I scooped up the next section of the file detailing counts of fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Mara allowed the ghost of a grim smile. I took the liberty of reaching out to a few interested parties regarding your stepmother's activities. She slid a document across the desk. The IRS, SEC, you name it. By the time we're through, Lana Winter's tangled financial web will be laid bare, along with the full extent of her years-long con. Brilliant, I breathed, already envisioning her highfalutin lifestyle crumbling away to nothing but 4 drab prison walls. We moved swiftly and decisively, on all fronts. Mara's voice carried a lethal edge, a lioness scenting blood. Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her. A feral smile curved my lips as the first papers were drawn up, the battle fully joined. Game on, Lana. Don't bother hiring extra security. There's nowhere left for you to hide. The rules of engagement were set, and I wouldn't rest until I'd claimed victory through sheer overwhelming force. By the time this was over, that woman's life would be in ashes at my feet. The next several months were a dizzying cyclone of legal filings, deposition hearings, and mounting media frenzies as the twin proceedings against Lana and Alex accelerated. Mara was an indomitable force, calmly dismantling every underhanded tactic and angle of attack their lawyers attempted. I lost count of how many times I was grilled under oath, forced to recount in granular detail the undoing of my marriage. Each new dissolution hearing was akin to lancing a fresh wound, raw anger and humiliation burning in my throat. But I kept my composure, didn't dare let Lana or that sniveling weasel Alex see me flinch, no matter how many times Alex's lawyer tried to impugn my character or cast aspersions about my motives. Let them sling mud, I thought coldly. Won't change the truth staring them in the face. Speaking of which, Lana's legal battle was rapidly devolving into a masterclass of denial and misdirection. Her lawyers deployed every trick in the book to cast doubt on the mountain of incriminating evidence we'd amassed. Forged documents, they claimed, falsified testimony from paid actors, a coordinated campaign of lies by a bitter ex-wife desperately clinging to her material lifestyle. I had to smother laughter as I watched their clown show unfold in utter seriousness before the bench. Did Lana really think those third-rate theatrics would hold up against the towering edifice of proof we'd constructed? Mara shredded each absurd claim to bits with almost bored efficiency. Forensic records, rock-solid witness accounts, every damning data point laid out with the ruthless precision of a scalpel. And through it all, I took petty satisfaction in watching Lana's glaring weakness on the stand, as her artfully composed facade increasingly dissolved into flop sweat and desperate stammering. For once, the master manipulator had no script to fall back on, no lies to distort the corrosive truth burning her alive in that courtroom. The weeks ticked by with remorseless efficiency as the dual cases built to an inexorable climax. Lana's blustering faltered, her hired guns of lawyers slowly resigning themselves to the futility of their straits. At last, the day of reckoning dawned, a final trial date to decide both my divorce and the civil case against my shattered stepmother. I dressed simply but sharply, fixing my hair into a tight chignon as I steeled myself for the fight still to come. Alex and Lana were already seated at the defendant's table when I strode into the courtroom, heads bent in whispered conference with their haggard legal teams. They turned as one in my direction, twin expressions of loathing and fear. For the first time, I allowed myself a thin, predatory smile. They should be afraid of the all-consuming justice I was about to unleash. The proceedings passed in a whirlwind of procedural formalities, evidence rehashed, and accounts culminating to their inevitable apex. When the jury finally returned with their verdict, a deafening hush fell over the gallery. On the charge of felony embezzlement, how do you find? The forewoman stood, shoulders squared. We, the jury, find the defendant Lana Winters guilty. An electric shock seemed to judder through the courtroom. I could have sworn I heard the sharp crack of Lana's composure shattering in that instant as the words detonated in her ears. Tears began leaking from her eyes as the judge continued the stony pronouncement. Furthermore, the court finds sufficient grounds for civil tort based on alienation of affection in the matter of Bryn Ellis versus Alex Hammond. Divorce proceedings will commence immediately. A keening wail tore from Lana's throat as the full weight of loss crashed down upon her. Reputation, riches, the gilded facade of her life, all of it sledgehammered into rubble. And there, in the burning pyre of her ruination, the chains of bitterness that had shackled my soul for so long finally fell away in sublime release. Over. It was finally, utterly over. I took one last look at the shuddering, broken thing crumpled in the defendant's chair. The beast that had nearly destroyed me now caged at last. Not a shred of pity, mercy, or remorse remained between us. Only the karmic scales bearing down with implacable purgative force. As the bailiffs moved to take them away, Lana looked up at me with reddened, hateful eyes. But the iron curtain of my stare didn't waver until her disgrace finally dissolved behind the towering barricades of institutional gray. In the end, courage and truth had prevailed over calculation and venom. And although the road here had been brutal, my peace was finally restored. The rest would pass like a fever dream blasted away on the cleansing wind of justice served. I was free, reborn from the ashes of betrayal into someone tempered, someone stronger than I'd ever imagined. As I exited the courthouse and strode into the brilliant daylight, the specter of the past crumbling like ashes away, I inhaled the crisp air of my new life, untethered, inviolable, and fueled by deepest resilience. My vengeance was complete, but my true victory had only just begun. In the days and weeks following the court verdicts, an eerie silence descended upon my life. The seething crusade that had fueled my every waking breath abruptly faded, leaving a void I didn't quite know how to fill. Gone were the whispered strategizing sessions with Mara, the burning need to scour legal documents for any advantage over Lana's wicked machinations. Even taking Sam's calls, those pillars of support and levity as we dismantled my traitorous adversaries, started to feel like echoes of a life no longer mine. The cathartic release of justice served should have ushered in a tidal wave of closure, of inner peace regained. So why did I feel so unmoored? Adrift in the vacuum of my own victory? Perhaps it was the sudden quiet allowing darker reflections to encroach, looming specters of doubt creeping in from the shadows of my mind. What if I went too far in my crusade for vengeance? Sure, Lana and Alex had been snakes, betraying me in unforgivable ways, but the scorched earth demolition of their lives, the relentless and frankly gleeful unraveling of Lana's influence, resources, and very identity, had that crossed some moral event horizon? I tried to shove the thought aside, to revel in my hard-won vindication. But there was no denying the flashes of my own ruthlessness that kept surfacing, unbidden. The cold, unflinching determination to lay waste to anyone and anything standing in my path. Mara's words echoed with disquieting clarity. Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her. Had I simply become the reverse side of that very same coin? The doubts gnawed and festered, driving me late one night to the very place where this nightmare had begun. My stately home in the suburbs sat hauntingly silent under the pale moonlight. I let myself in with the spare key, wandering from room to empty room like a restless specter. So many memories echoed from every corner, both beautiful and terrible, all now cast in the cold, harsh light of irredeemable deceit. The kitchen, garish and obscene. The den, awash in Dad's mournful admonitions. The bedroom, a blighted sanctuary. By the time I reached the living room fireplace, huddled on the hearth in the darkness, bone-deep weariness threatened to overwhelm me. Who was I now in the ashes of this harrowing ordeal? Some hardened, embittered mercenary of my own vengeance, or a tenacious survivor determined to wrest back her dignity from the jaws of destruction? My gaze drifted over the mantel, lingering on the solitary framed photo, a happier time when the future seemed bright before the first hairline cracks appeared in the facade. I brushed the glass with my fingertips, tears stinging my eyes. How had it all gone so wrong? When did the downward spiral pick up that inexorable momentum towards mutually assured ruination? A soft sound made me stiffen, whirling to find the intruder, only to freeze as Sam padded into the pool of dim light. "Bryn?" She spoke softly, eyes filled with gentle concern. "I got your message. You said you needed." Her voice trailed off as I let the tightly wound mask slip, hot tears spilling in silent streams down my cheeks. It was too much, the weight of this whole shattered saga. I craved the absolution that had always seemed so clear before. But no platitudes came as Sam gathered me in her arms, simply holding on as the anguish of the last several months poured out in ragged sobs. For the first time since uncovering the betrayal, I allowed myself to shatter completely, burying my face in her shoulder as the foundations cracked open and the flood washed over. In that moment of abject brokenness, the hardened shell of victorious Bryn finally disintegrated, leaving only the raw, wounded soul desperate to find its way back towards the light. Perhaps this keening release would prove the catharsis I'd been seeking all along. The purging of toxic rage to make way for rebirth, rising up from the scorched earth left in vengeance's wake. Only time would tell. For now, I simply surrendered to the corrosive waves crashing over me, allowing the last remnants of my former life to dissolve into the ether. My road to healing stretched before me, arduous yet infinitely promising for what lay at its end, inner peace at last reclaimed. As Sam held vigil over my tear-streaked epiphany, the bitter taste of retribution gradually gave way to the promise of something far sweeter on the horizon, a true chance to begin anew. In the weeks following my cathartic breakdown at the old house, a profound shift took hold within me. It started small, rediscovering simple joys like morning coffee on the patio or evening walks around the neighborhood, mundane routines that had been crushed under the weight of trauma and obsession. Gradually, I felt the icy grip of bitterness and anger loosening its hold over my heart, replaced by a dawning sense of freedom and infinite possibility stretching out before me. When the final divorce paperwork arrived with a stark finality, I simply filed it away without fanfare. The severing of that wretched bond with Alex stirred none of the old vengeful urges, only a vaguely bittersweet feeling. Rather than dwell on the death of what was, all my energy channeled towards dreaming of what could be. It all culminated one bright spring morning over brunch with Sam as I announced my decision. "I'm selling the house." She paused, fork laden with Belgian waffle hovering midair. "You are?" "Whoa, that's huge, B." A small smile played over her lips as understanding blossomed. "Symbolic fresh start and all that?" I nodded, unable to contain my own widening grin. "Exactly. That place holds too many toxic memories, like a darkened void I keep getting inextricably pulled back into." I took a deep breath, savoring the rising sense of lightness in my chest. It's time to let go fully and move forward, you know? Sam reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm proud of you for taking that leap," she said simply, eyes shining. We'd come such an unimaginably long way since those early, anguished days following the betrayal's discovery. From there, it was a whirlwind of action, hiring an elite realtor, sorting through our old life's worth of possessions, itemizing what to take and what to discard. With each box taped up, an item crossed off the list, I felt layers of my former self being gently shed and set aside. Finally, the big day arrived with the ringing of the doorbell. A couple straight off the real estate marketing brochure. Young, impeccably dressed, beaming at the prospect of their new dream home as I greeted them with the keys. I led them through the stately foyer towards the living area, though my strides gradually slowed as a clutch of bittersweet memories resurfaced. Flashes of holidays spent with Dad, laughter ringing through the space, recollections of smiling, promising days when this rambling manor had radiated warmth and joy, before the rot had set in and poisoned it all from within. The wife seemed to sense my pensive mood as she laid a gentle hand on my arm. "You've made so many wonderful memories here, I can tell." She gave a reassuring smile. "But I promise we'll fill this place with brand new joys of our own." I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her perceptiveness, before nodding slowly. "I hope you do." With that, I pressed the keys into her palm and strode out onto the front path one final time, pausing to drink in the elegant facade for the last time, now divested of its sordid significance. This chapter was officially closed, soon to be replaced by happier days in the making. My journey continued ever onward and upward. Over the next few months, the windfall from the profitable sale, combined with my meager inheritance and court settlement, allowed me to slowly rebuild my life through more positive, rewarding outlets. I rededicated myself to my marketing career with a vengeance, rising swiftly through the ranks and exploring new entrepreneurial opportunities. But even more fulfilling were the passion projects, like spearheading a nonprofit for women affected by abuse and financial dissolution. Each micro act of service, of selfless giving back, was like a healing balm applied against the wounds of my former trauma. Where anger and hatred had once festered, compassion and optimism now blossomed in their place. And when a potential new romantic connection gradually materialized, I felt unshakably self-assured in walking that path, buoyed by the rediscovered strength of my convictions. I was Bryn Ellis, bold survivor reborn, master of my own destiny, free from the shackles of others' deceptions. The rising dawn of a new lifetime of possibilities stretched gloriously ahead in reverent silence. No further words were required for the shining truth that filled my soul on this day. I had confronted the darkest nights. I had waged the battles that defined me. And from the searing crucible of anguish, I emerged incandescent, inviolable, and infinitely wiser. My vengeance was complete. But more importantly, my true victory had only just begun.